Hey there, it's Berlin briefing time. Divide and rule. How easy is it to manipulate the public debate and even derail the previously sacrosanct process of electing constitutional court judges here in Germany? Well, pretty easy, we just learned. I'll be honest with you, when we saw that vote postponed, initially we were debating here, is this much of a story? And now we're actually doing the second episode. Check out the last one to see all about the political context. But this time around, we want to speak about how the far-right AfD party, who spread untruths about that candidate that became so controversial, just launched a strategy which includes polarization as a key method to broaden its support. With me here to separate fact from conspiracy theory and to do a damage assessment of German democracy are two highly qualified people to speak about this. The director of Polisphere, Philipp Sälhoff, the director of a think tank that has done the forensics on this campaign that built up and derailed the election of a constitutional court judge here in Germany, and Matt Moore, my political correspondent colleague, who talks all things AfD and watches the far-right AfD very closely. But I want to start with you, Philipp. Why is this such a big story, and what did your close examination of the information campaign about this produce?
I think it's a big story because we haven't seen a campaign like influence manipulation campaign being so successful in terms of a parliament decision. There's a lot in terms of like a lot of disinformation and manipulation and polarizing criticism going on, which is also to be separated. That's very important. And also campaigns going on before any, or like, let's say, a lot of parliamentary decisions and political discourses. But what we saw here, for a couple of reasons, is a very good example how this can affect and influence not only, that's very important. Of course, this campaign was not the only reason this thing went how it went, but it was it significantly contributed to that, and that is in that case unprecedented. And what we found is, in short, we got around 41,000 Twitter posts and analyzed them in terms of like how was the judge, the candidate, debated, perceived, what was like connected, what kind of topics to her, and we saw a shift over the 10 days only. We're not talking about like a long time, and then abortion really was a key trigger, mobilizing more Twitter or like X users, and also mobilizing initiatives, and then building up pressure towards the Conservative Party. And in the very end, there was accusations of like a fake or like mistakes in her PhD thesis, and that was really a couple of hours just before, and that was kind of the final stage, which led to the to the cancellation of the election.
Now, there's nothing usual about political campaigns. If parties don't like a candidate, of course, they're going to rally support to not get someone elected. But there was something very unusual about the build-up of this campaign. If you can just walk us through the past 2 weeks, why did you come to the conclusion that this, in fact, amounts to an attempt to polarize rather than being a campaign from the right of centre political camp, which includes the AfD party? We're not suggesting that this was orchestrated solely by the AfD. So Correct. Where was the difference here?
That's a very important point. What we found is a couple of really strong indicators of a campaign. That sums up to a campaign. This is not orchestrated, as far as we know, by one actor or like a hidden circle planning it in like really in detail. One thing one have to keep in mind when we talk about this, we're talking about a very stable and in the meantime, extended network of actors from the far right, from the populist right, very well connected into different groups. And there is like a dynamic kicking in when some case or some question or some like political issue is addressed. And when this happens, there is like this dynamic going on. So you don't even need like an orchestrated or like somebody in the back who says, okay, you do this, you do that. Because we saw online petitions, we saw paid ads, we saw like a template, a tool that you can mail to your members of parliament. You want to tell them not to vote for her. And again, this is absolutely legal and like legit tools of campaigning. The important thing is that this was catalyzed by false accusations. And the main accusation was the abortion, or like that this judge, candidate for the judgment, Brosius Gersdorf, is open for legalizing abortion until the 9th month. And that really mobilized a lot. And that was the main trigger point. And then again, like in the end, the PhD accusations came in. And of course, also part of it is that there was other like reporting, there was critical reporting. And this is absolutely not only, okay, it's necessary to look into a candidate and to discuss her points of view, but on and that's important, on a basis of facts. And in this period of time, we didn't really have enough like time to have a proper conversation. It was like the person was not really known for like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. She had one interview last year, and then we saw that her Wikipedia entry was somehow edited a couple of like end of June, and then there was one article by the FAZ which was absolutely okay, would like address the abortion issue, or like her compared her to the other candidates. And then like some far right or right media outlets started to make reports and articles. Also them, like some of them are even moderate. Like it's not always the same, like in intensity. But then it got flooded into Twitter, and then things escalated.
Yeah, let's zoom in on that allegation against this candidate. It was alleged after, in fact, the 30th of June. That's when the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the FAZ, a daily here, published an article about the 3 nominees. Very shortly after that, we saw a couple of right-wing or right-leaning publications zooming in on the issue of abortion. And a week later, it was an MP from the far-right AfD, Mrs. von Storch, who posed this question to the Chancellor during Chancellor's question time on this very issue. Let's just take a listen to this.
I'm asking you if you can reconcile with your conscience voting for Ms. Brosius Gersdorf, who thinks human dignity does not apply to those who have not been born yet. Ms. Brosius Gersdorf has said that human dignity does not extend to a 9-month-old child 2 minutes before it is born. Can you reconcile with your conscience voting for this woman, knowing that she will presumably be deciding over the abolition of paragraph 218 in the near future?
On another occasion, I would be happy to discuss the scope and reach of Article 1, Sentence 1 of our basic law, with you in particular, Ms. von Storch. But my simple answer to the question you have asked here is yes.
And Matt, I want to throw this to you, because I remember sitting in Parliament listening to this exchange and thinking, this is where I would edit. I would just let the Chancellor say yes if I wanted to land him in hot water. And that's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, the AfD have realised a couple of things. They've realised that achieving a viral moment from this exchange from Parliament, basically debates and your opportunity to question the Chancellor, is really potent if you do it right, and if you get the question right, and if you can package that and put it out on social media. So they've understood that, and that's what they've done in this scenario. This question and its answer, the answer from the Chancellor, were then interpreted on social media as being the Chancellor basically was asked, would you be happy to support a candidate who is in favour of abortion up until the 9th month? Highly controversial, not based in fact, but that's the question. And his answer is, yeah. And so to put that together, it was a kind of misinterpretation of this woman's actual beliefs and what she said about this human dignity clause in the Constitution, and kind of they interpret that as basically her being pro-abortion, and then put it together, and then you see what happened. I mean, I watched that debate develop over the week, and kind of every day just more noise about this woman on my social media channels, on TikTok, and to the point where then Beatrix von Storch put that question to the Chancellor, then put it out.
The AfD MP.
The AfD MP that we've just heard. And then it just took on another world of its own on social media. And I think that's where we see the AfD really kind of capitalise on these moments, these issues to extend their reach.
Philipp, you did the in-depth examination on that viral moment. Can you just tell us what impact that post in itself had, and which other claims it then drew on the candidate who in the end appears like she could be derailed in the end?
The Beatrix von Storch post was the account, and the post was the most important post and the most important account we observed in this sample of I think 46,000 accounts we analyzed. And this very tweet was extremely going through the roof, because it was about this issue we just talked about, extremely polarizing, extremely emotional. And that was also the main false accusation. We also saw accusations in false accusation, or let's say a framing of her in an incorrect way, because this is it's a line. It's not everything is disinformation. It's also something like calling her activist, like a left radical activist. So, which is like saying activist. I mean, that's like legal questions. That's something we can't divide here, because we this is a legal issue. But the framing and some disinformations about her stance on vaccination, on ideology like gender. We can also see with the other judge, Ann-Kathrin Kaufold, that climate, like she being a very radical climate activist, and this activism alone, like to frame a judge as activist, is derailing and is a false narrative being set. So there were statements like, this woman wants to get rid of the fundamental rights of the Grundrechte, and things like that. But to come back to Beatrix von Storch, the AfD network, really started to operate then, and multiplying and retweeting these kind of statements, and then another initiative against abortion started this mailing tool, let's say so, and this was connected to this accusation. And from our assessment, this is a very critical point. You had this accusation of this Richterin des Grauens, so the judge of horror, I don't know, wants to legalize abortion until the 9th month. Here you can email your member of parliament. And that was spread around, and this really was a key point in the campaign.
And again, this is part of ordinary political business. You can launch a campaign, you can call on people, you can have a petition to write to your local MPs. But the huge difference here is that it was fundamentally based on a false claim. So what role would you say that AfD accounts had in shifting this from the mode of being a legitimate campaign to actually a distortion of facts and manipulation?
By reproducing this false claim, there were other members of parliament who also called their viewers or users to write to their respective conservative members of parliament, again with a connection to these false accusation and false narratives. And this is the key point. And as you said, a campaign, And to be honest, also, I don't fully understand sometimes when people feel or like the issue of a campaign is being framed as per se a negative thing. It is not. A public discourse, a political discourse is free to have campaigns. And when we see I can't count the questions of climate, of social issues, of any political decision, parliamentary decisions, and then NGOs or parties or associations launching, joining campaigns. Absolutely, with all the tools we just said. That's fine.
Yes,
the issue is this connection.
Yeah,
the issue is a connection to using the capitalizing of false accusation.
Yeah, like just to be clear, so there's a lot of reflection going on. So this happened. The Conservatives couldn't convince some of their members to vote for this candidate. You even had people who were involved in that process saying we just weren't armed. We weren't ready for the campaign that came at us, which I think is really revealing. As we talk about disinformation campaigns, you have a party like the AfD that really understands how to communicate online and how to frame things in a certain way to get maximum reach, to shift the debate and to change people's mind, to persuade people fundamentally. Then you have other parties that are aware of disinformation in the abstract but don't see it when they're confronted with it day to day. And I think it was interesting that he said, we were not ready for that campaign. And I wonder now, what lessons will they take from this? Now, to bring us back to the AfD, since its formation, has been a party that really, since a couple of years after it formed, it really has become a party that has gone all in on polarisation. That is, shift views away from the centre to the extremes. And fundamentally, I saw this debate unfold with the judge, and I was at the same time that I was reading this strategy paper that was leaked. And it seemed to me that the incident with the judge was like a perfect opportunity for them to try this out, this strategy, which is we want to portray the centre-left as radical. So you have a judge who, by all accounts, is someone with fairly middle-of-the-road views, but we're gonna frame her as radical. Did they do that successfully? You can ask yourself, well, will she be a judge in the Supreme Court? That remains to be seen, but it looks like that her chances are diminishing by the day. And at the same time, create a situation where people in the centre-right CDU have a problem voting with their party because they think that the AfD is actually is on the right course on certain issues. So polarisation is really important for this party. And it was just like, we need to set this out, and this was a first opportunity for them to do it, and they managed to do it really quite successfully, you would argue.
And the whole concept of polarisation, this would have been your assessment until a couple of weeks ago, until that paper was leaked, where it actually is flagged as a method of particularly dividing this coalition of the Social Democrats and the conservative CDU-CSU, Friedrich Merz's party, which is new in the German political context, that would be put center stage. And Alice Weidel, the co-leader of the far-right AfD party, she just did her summer interview. It's kind of a traditional thing here that top politicians do long interviews during the summertime. And she was asked about what good can come of polarization. She didn't really answer the question. We have another clip here of her where the presenter, Matthias Preiss from German Public Service TV, has to speak against a backdrop of a campaign, a political demonstration against Alice Weidel. So it's a very, very noisy environment. So that also points to how heated the debate over the AfD is at the moment, where she gets a very plain question of whether the AfD would adhere to a court ruling if it comes to deciding whether the AfD aims to undermine German democracy itself, whether the AfD would accept such a court ruling. Let's just take a listen to the very lengthy answer.
Do you accept German courts?
You correctly said that the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution reports to the Ministry of the Interior. And in the past, we had Nancy Faeser, an SPD politician there, and now we have Mr. Dobrindt there. So if that office makes that classification, then it is not independent. If a court also allows that classification to apply in some way, just to give an example, because it is so wonderful, knife crime within our national borders. That's a development over the last 10 years that I clearly illuminate and say that we have a migrant problem here that we did not have before, an imported problem. Then this is immediately taken up and brought before the court. And I have to tell you that the political agenda there is also clear.
So most of that answer was political inside baseball. The chorus behind Alice Weidel, and this caused a mini kind of scandal here in Germany in itself, was essentially singing "Screw AfD." So a very heated environment this was taking place in. So, Philipp, on the one hand, we had the AfD play a central role in this campaign against a constitutional court judge by launching information that simply wasn't true, alleging positions that weren't the positions of that candidate. And on the other hand, we see the co-leader here essentially duck very fundamental questions about where the AfD stands and whether it stands with the constitutional order here in Germany. What analysis has your think tank, Polisphere, done on the content of AfD communication?
The content of AfD communication in this case is not so much different to other cases when we look at the use of misleading, partially false information. And we know the AfD communication online is technically performance-wise very good because they are very good in using this polarizing and false information. This is to be separated. Not everything the AfD tweets or posts online is false in a way, but they are very good in using certain content pieces or news reports and then putting it in this frame about Germany going down, Germany introduce or stepping in a war, that German pensioners are suffering from poverty and we're sending tanks to Ukraine and all. You can go to literally every policy field, and there are the talking points and the narratives, and so and so bits and pieces of actual true facts, but mostly of false narratives are being used, and also sometimes false accusation to fit this narrative and to mobilize voters and potential voters, and that is also what happened here, mostly with the abortion issue, and what is also to be in the very beginning the stance of Ms. Borsius-Gersdorf about a potential AfD investigation or a process about abolishing the party was a very critical point, but it did not really go through in the discourse, in the online discourse. But the abortion issue got through. So that is also a development, and then you can argue, okay, was that was it a tool? They used the abortion to actually prevent this candidate from being a judge who could potentially decide over this AfD process. This is a scenario, I have to say. It makes sense, but this would be something which is can't be proved yet, but definitely in the term of the paper, we also talked about the strategy paper. As Mel said, it perfectly plays this playbook, or it's a perfect case for this playbook. And to be fair, the content of the strategy paper was not really surprising for anyone following the debate and the positioning of the AfD and to divide the coalition, to frame themselves as a true conservatives and so on. The interesting part was how professionally it was framed and or phrased and in a presentation, and that was the actual news, but not so much the content and the strategy.
Well, I mean, you got to remember this is for people, this is a party that has doubled the number of its MPs. A lot of the MPs that have come into Parliament now are complete novices. They're really not seasoned. Beatrix von Storck, who we've seen there, really knows how to work the media. She's been in politics for a long time. Same with Alice Weidel. a lot of people are coming in. This is like their introduction to how we're going to do politics for the next few years. So it was almost like a kind of go home, read this over the summer break. And I think I would just say that if I was in the other political parties, I would also make this compulsory reading for the summer break, because you will see just how you're going to be targeted, how you're going to be hit with attack campaigns from the AfD, and to prepare for that, because it can be successful, as we've just seen.
And I think it's interesting that you point out the novices. I know from many conversations I've had after that vote had to be postponed because essentially the conservative camp of Friedrich Merz didn't have their votes together. And there's a lot of searching going on, and also a sense that their MPs are novices to this whole aspect of media campaigns, which in the end actually saw the Catholic Church criticize this candidate. There was a bishop criticizing her who has since apologized after having a telephone conversation with her, but it's already happened, and many MPs have moved past the point where they can really return to backing her. So this is a problem. But I just want to quote someone to you, Lars Klingbeil. He's the vice chancellor, leader of the junior partner in this coalition, the Social Democrats, whose candidate has so been questioned and really been slandered in public now. And he says it's a question of principle. Sorry, I've put on my glass. It's a question of principle whether to give in to pressure from right-wing networks who defame a highly qualified woman. So he's clearly taking a stance of principle there. But is this really all about right-wing publications and also the AfD, or is this also the weakness of these Big Ten parties to be able to communicate effectively?
Absolutely. Of course, this is all about, we work in political communication. It's about narratives. It's about being prepared for the attacks that may come, having an answer, knowing to rally your troops. In this case, their MPs. This is going to come at you. We're going to weather the storm, and they were just completely not ready for it. And that's why I think, although we know that the AfD is trying to kind of polarize the debate, whether it's on migration or whether it's on abortion, you still have to be prepared for it. I mean, fundamentally, the AfD is trying to kind of position themselves as normal. They actually say that in the strategy paper. The job is to create the centre-left, to portray the centre-left as radical, and therefore the AfD as this kind of civic, conservative normal. That's the long-term plan, because that we will increase our voter numbers over the years. So if you're not ready for that debate and you're not prepared for it, then you're going to lose it going forward.
Yeah, Philipp, can you flip that around for us? Clearly, was there any fight back from other parties that you analysed?
We also did a network analysis and looked at the accounts, also other accounts. There was a contra poll, let's say, like a counter communication. It was way smaller. It was mainly actually like a couple of green accounts from the Green Party. Some like not minor, but like the whole sum of accounts joining was relatively small in comparison to the communication against her. The campaign also, and a part of it, the campaign again. Campaign is one thing, criticism is another thing. This all got together, and it was catalyzed by the false accusations. From the SPD, for instance, there was not so much, at least in the discourse and also publicly discourse, was after the vote was postponed. There was like strong statements from the SPD, and I have no doubt that they were like would back or backed the candidate, but it wasn't heard. It wasn't like they did not join the conversation. And to be fair in terms of this development, and for me, the most critical issue here, or like one of the most critical issue, if not the most critical issue, is the time frame. Nobody, or very few people saw that coming. You need to monitor these debate very closely. And this kind of election of constitutional judges is, for Germany, it's the first time it was postponed. It's actually like a formal thing. You do that, and you agree on candidates, and then it the parliament votes. It's not, you don't see it like as a political potential campaign. And I think this is also, like a very big success factor of the campaign. And then the SPD, when it like was really high, when this peaked with the abortion, and when then the PhD accusations came in, it was just too fast to respond effectively. And again, as long as we have open discourse rooms and discourse arenas, and we have democratic decisions, there is always the chance of influencing a decision by very short-timed, very like beforehand releasing false informations and or like misleading narratives.
And we did a whole episode actually on that political fallout and how the process was derailed. You can see that just below here. That was the last episode.
It's interesting that what Philipp said about being prepared for the debate and not seeing a big counter debate, because like the CDU, the Conservative Centre-Right Party, I think their presence on TikTok has got much better recently. But like, speak to people in the SPD, the Social Democrats, they're like, the people in charge of media don't have TikTok accounts, and if you're not on those platforms, then you're missing huge parts of the debate. And I think so. It's maybe like one of the other lessons in this is just that they need to be much more actively engaged on those social media platforms where people are actually debating a lot of this stuff, especially young people.
As someone very closely observing the Conservative camp here in Germany, I'm very curious which lessons individual MPs will draw from this, because some actually realize that they get a lot of traction if they then team up with the far-right AfD's line of argument there as well. So I really wonder what they will do with this, and they have a very long, tough summer to analyse this. And Philipp, just to wrap up, you've been inundated with requests for interviews based on the analysis you've done, but I'm sure that you've also been called up by policymakers. So what is your conclusion from what you've observed, and what's the advice that you're giving out to policymakers across the political spectrum? What lessons should be learned out of this campaign?
For policymakers, or let's say political actors, I would agree what Matt just said, like taking these kind of discourses more serious, follow more closely. You don't have to do dance videos on TikTok. You just need to know what's going on there. For the process of policymaking, I think one lesson is there are, I don't want to say no, but there are less non-political decisions. So a very, very key lesson is even the election of judges, constitutional judges, and we're not in America, it's like not in the US where it's a, like intense debate, now can also be politicized and be polarized and used as a political instrument. And we need to be prepared that this also will apply for other decisions we don't see as political by now. And this is, from my point of view, the most important learning. The other, like to have a community, to have media literacy, to have a critical thinking. I mean, these are members of parliament. It's not that they saw something on Twitter and then just believed it. They do have a conversation about it. And I don't want to make it like to being put too easy about like this manipulation effect. It played a role, but for the future, having a better coordination within the parties, within the government. I think Jens Spahn, the chairman, missed some conversations in the like before, and you already mentioned that in the other episode, and to be more resilient, to be more coherent and unite in terms of the political decision making and the government body itself. Because as we just discussed, they tried to split that up and they succeeded here.
Matt, how has this changed the prism through which you observe the AfD?
I mean, I think it's about being alive to the strategies, right? So you see a message and you understand why that message is there. I wanted to hold this up, right? I don't know if you can see this, but this is basically from the AfD strategy paper. For me, it's super interesting because it reveals how the first voters, this is a chart showing the first voters and where they voted in 2021, and their centre parties are the Greens and the FDP are the strongest parties among first-time voters. And in 2025, the strongest and most popular parties were the parties at the extremes, the Left Party and the AfD. So you can see how that polarisation debate is taking hold among younger voters. And so that's why I think it's, to follow on what Philipp said, it's super important that their parties are alive to this, engaging in it, and on those platforms where first-time voters and young people are.
Great. Well, I also want to stress that abortion, there's no culture war about abortion in Germany. So this came pretty much out of the blue, also within the conservative camp, and that this ignited such a mini culture war within the conservative camp itself. I want to leave it there. I'm sure this is not the last one we will be doing on the whole question of misinformation and where campaigns turn into something more sinister, into manipulation of the political process. Philipp Sälhoff, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Also, Matt, thanks so much for your insights as ever. And now you're fully briefed up on what is clearly a continuing process of polarization here in Germany as well. But a lot of analysis is going into that. We will be part of that, of course. And don't forget to catch up with the weekly Berlin Briefing newsletter, which looks in depth at the current stories of the day, but also the overarching political process in Germany's geopolitical outlook. And we look forward to briefing you up again next week.